Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let me just make sure this is working.
Let you take, you can take what you want home. So I'd be.
Just make sure this is working.
Let you take, you can take what you want home. So I'd be.
Pretty loud. Sounds good. Okay. So I mean, it's in the title there. I wouldn't say I'm editing necessarily. I'm more watching it, taking notes, notes for like all the different things. This is hours and hours long. There will be a little bit of editing here and there to like do audio and stuff, but for the most part, I'm just kind of watching this. And, doing a little bit of stuff. Okay.
Fishing through the ones I like, but most of them were stale. Yeah. So I just try to grab a few that were fresh.
My dad's talking about, I think we're at like movies or something. Let me see. We're at, oh yeah, so his uncle Dom used to be a garbage man. He also used to work at Dunkin' Donuts, and he used to bring home like 300 donuts, and he'd go through the bag and pick out the ones that weren't stale.
Oh, this full of gone donuts, okay? So he would have that in his house. Most of them were stale. Then, so he let you take, you can take what you want home. So I'd be fishing through the ones I like, but most of them were stale. Yeah. So I just try to grab a few that were fresh.
1 in 10 were good.
Yeah, 1 in 5 were stale. There was most of them were stale. Yeah, most of them were still good, but some of them were stale. But then, but then also like the chocolate got onto the other donut, and the other mush got mushed up and whatever. The jelly came out, that kind of thing.
Okay, to bring it back to what we're doing. So I was just curious about what going to movies was like.
Went to the movies from about 1955 to.
All right, back to movies.
That kind of thing.
Okay, to bring it back. Little tangent. Okay, so this is 01, 24, let's just say 30. Oh, 01, 24, 30 to I don't know, back to seeing movies. Whoops. Let me save this before anything happens. Okay, to bring it back to what we're doing. So I was just curious about what going to movies was like.
Went to the movies from about 1955 to basically to when I was an adult. I went to until the Deluxe closed. I went there till I left Nunna's house. Almost I went to the Deluxe for years.
Early.
I went to the Deluxe until I was in my 20s, probably. Yeah.
So okay, and now, when did you start? When did your fascination and/or start of trains happen? When did you have like your first train thing? How old were you? Okay. All right, let's change this to 25. Let's just say 25.
But when I was a kid, every kid then liked trains. Mm-hmm. Every kid liked trains, and every kid liked astronomy. Mm-hmm. They liked the planets, and every kid liked dinosaurs. Every boy liked dinosaurs. Everybody liked trains, and everybody liked telescopes to see the stars and the planets.
That's cool.
Everybody did. And also, if you wanted, you were fascinated with being. Everybody wanted to be a fireman. or a cowboy. What do you want to be when you grow up? A cowboy. What do you want to be when you grow up? A fireman. Now, Davy Crockett came around in 1954, and my name was Davy, because I was David, so I became Davy Crockett. And Uncle Dom from Macy's got me this coonskin cap, a real fur cap with a tail.
From Macy's.
From Macy's, but it was expensive. He was, I forgot to say that, he was a garbage man in Manhasset, where you were rich.
Oh, wow.
See, so they threw away a lot of stuff that was good.
Yeah.
In other words, they were throwing away stuff that from a poor neighborhood that you wouldn't throw away.
Yeah.
So they were throwing away good stuff, and that's why he was garming it, because he could garm it because it was good stuff. So it wasn't junk. He wasn't getting, like, he got a bike. The bike was fine.
Yeah.
But people threw it away because they were rich.
Yeah.
So they just were replacing it. If the bike got 2 years old, they would replace it, so they would throw it away. So in that case, he really wasn't getting that much junk. It was really, a lot of it was good stuff.
Yeah.
He actually got all their furniture from their house and stuff. I mean, a lot of good stuff. I mean, good stuff meaning it was usable.
Yeah.
So anyway, to make a long story short, I lost what I was going to say.
The coonskin cap for Davy.
Right, he gave me this coonskin cap. I was like, he gave me gold. Because I was the only kid. They had this shitty kind of ones in the in Woolworths. They were made out of like cat hair or something.
Yeah.
You know, like ugh. It was like pieces of garbage made in China or something. This mine was like real. It had real fur and it had the tail. Nobody had the tail but me. You had to have the tail. So I was walking around like I'm like the greatest thing in sliced bread, you know, with the tail. Amazing. Plus they got me the lamp. I got the Davy Crockett lamp for my bedroom.
Holy shit. My Aunt Terry just sent me a picture of that. See if I can get this into here. Let's see. No. 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 Definitely sent me a picture of the fucking lamp. Here we go. Okay, I found it. Let's get it to... First, I'm going to send it to my Mac. And then I'm going to hook it up to... Where is the... I have a hard drive. Here it is. Did it send? Yeah, I think I muted it. Yeah, okay. So now we're gonna put this in here. I could hook up the phone to my laptop. I mean, I could hook up the phone to my PC, but I'm afraid of like slowing it down. So I'll just do this and put it right into here. Oh boy, a lot of numbers. Starts with a 6-9. Nice. I might need to actually, it's an HEIC file. Let me actually export this as like a PNG. Yeah, that's probably going to be better. Go here. Yeah, I'm just going to call it, Crockett lamp. Okay, I'm just going to go right into the thing there. Okay, we're going to eject it. Previews using it. Okay, well, quit preview then. Eject it. Okay. Is it ejected? It is ejected. Now we'll go into the PC. Okay, we're going to go in here. It should be Crockett lamp. We're going to copy. And we're going to put it where this stuff is. Paste. Great. Okay. Now we're going to go back here. We're going to go to images and we're going to import this. This is the actual lamp. Cool. So let's throw that in here. Go to effect controls. Let's see. Could probably crop the top of that off. So let's do effects, crop, throw the crop on it. Back to effects controls. Here's crop top. Cool. Let's bring up the bottom slightly too. Cool. And now we're going to move it. I've been putting the things over here. Oh, you know what? I'm going to bring the bottom back down. Let's just say 0. Yeah, because I'm going to put a little bit of text. Now, I had some text previously. Here's the text. Okay, cool. So let's copy that. Bring it back here. Put that here. Don't exactly know where it's going to go at the moment. But, oops. That's the garbage truck. We want to bring this over to the lamp. All right, let's figure out like where I want to put this.
Real fur, and it had the tail. Nobody had the tail but me. You had to have the tail. So I was walking around like I'm like the greatest thing in sliced bread, you know, with the tail. Amazing. Plus they got me the lamp. I got the
Here it is. Okay, the lamp.
The tail. Amazing.
Let's see how long this will last. And I'll change what the text says shortly.
Spread, you know, with the tail. Amazing. Plus they got me the lamp. I got the
Too long. Let's make this shorter.
You know, with the tail. Amazing. Plus they got me the lamp. I got the Davy Crockett lamp for my bedroom.
Cool.
Because I had Hopalong Cassidy motif to my bedroom when I was a kid. He was my favorite cowboy. So I had Hopalong Cassidy wall. Because I had.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's short, but, you know, he stops talking about the lamp there. I want to give it as much screen time as possible. Whoops. Let's shorten this a bit.
Plus they got me the lamp.
Okay, so now the graphic. Okay, I don't want to do that. Oh yeah. Okay, so now I need to let's accommodate for the graphic. So we want to move the graphic to about there. And then, so now that, well, and it's a little low too. So let's, nope. Let's go up a little bit. Okay, and then we'll just move this over and maybe scale it up a little bit. There's probably a more precise way to do this. Maybe there is. Maybe I can... How do you... I used to know how to do this, like where you click on the picture. And you can just adjust it that way. Is it like transform? Field options? No. Properties. Set to frame size, scale to frame size, adjustment layer. Oh boy. Oops. All right, YouTube tutorial time. How to, whoops, oh, I always do that. I have two different keyboards here. How to scale an image in Premiere. Resize videos, how to resize images. I have it like muted at the moment because there's ads playing. Come on, hurry up.
Here, today I'm going to show you a quick tip. Premiere Pro have a 4K resolution. Old method is I would double click and I hit the shift key, grab one of the corners and just drag it all the way in.
Double click, okay. Shit, what did I do here? Oh boy, what is this? Oh, I see what I did. Okay, so you double click it, and then you hold shift. Oh, that's so annoying. I wish it would just lock to one side. Isn't that annoying? Like it scales from like the middle. Good enough. Okay. So you double click it. Gotcha. All right.
So I was walking around like I'm like the greatest thing in sliced bread, you know, with the tail.
Amazing.
Plus they got me the lamp. I got the Davy Crockett lamp for my bed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, good enough. I mean, it's not grammatically correct, but whatever.
Sliced bread, you know, with the tail.
Amazing.
Plus they got me the lamp. I got the Davy Crockett lamp for my bedroom.
Cool.
Because I had Hopalong Cassidy motif to my bedroom when I was a kid. He was my favorite cowboy. So I had Hopalong Cassidy wallpaper,
Cool.
and I had lamps and stuff. But then when I became Davy Crockett, Hopalong Cassidy sort of went out the door, and I became sort of like Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
And I remember having the horn, the powder.
Why don't I see the stupid waveforms anymore? There we go. Jesus.
Powder horn. You know what a powder horn is? Crockett.
Yeah.
And I remember having the horn, the powder horn. You know what a powder horn is? It's a
the powder horn,
horn
you keep the
that you
gunpowder
put
in,
you put your gunpowder in and you would put it into the gun.
Yeah.
So I had one of those.
That was for Hopalong, or that was for
That
Davy
was
Crockett?
Davy Crockett.
of course,
It was the
yeah.
powder horn. I had some kind of.
All right, hang on. I want to see what that looks like. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to bring this back here. I've been searching images and stuff. So let's see. Davy Crockett powder horn. That's cool. That's pretty cool. Powder horn. That's dope. I wonder if my dad had that bag.
buckskin kind of shirt or something, and I had the cap. And
awesome.
I was like Davy Crockett for like a year. And then that came and went.
Yeah,
that was like a fad.
Yeah.
And originally I was
Okay, wait. I also. Okay. Things boys liked then. Davy Crockett.
Hopalong Cassidy. Then I was Davy Crockett. And then it was a fad. But I was always interested in, like I said, you were talking about trains.
Yeah.
I was always interested, like every kid was, in trains. Now, the end of Grandma's Block in Flushing, 40th Road, there were trains.
Okay, we finally got into trains. My dad was a really big fan of trains. Yeah, as an example. Hang on. As an example, this was his. This is an actual piece of railroad track. I think it was just a paperweight. Looks like it has a 1/4-20 there, so maybe it was mounted at some point. I guess it was painted with some sort of paint, but this is a railroad piece of railroad track. Isn't that cool? Got this from my dad at some point. I've had it for a while. Oh, and railroad spike. Not entirely sure where this came from, but you probably see my pants. All right, no. So the track would be laid down, and to hold it in, they'd pound these into the earth, and this is the spikes what kept them down. So that's cool. Both were my dad's, and now they're mine. Okay, let's get back to it. All right, he's talking about trains. Like, so all that is to say that he liked trains. He had Lionel trains, which are in my attic.
Down by the creek, 40th Road, there were trains down by the creek.
When you say grandma, you mean your grandma?
My mother's mother,
Okay,
my mother's mother lived in Flushing on 40th Road. We spent a lot of time there when I was a kid. And we went at the end of her street, way down, this is a very poor street area, Flushing, poor, dilapidated, a lot of homes dilapidated. Her home was on the dilapidated side, but it was nice. Mm-hmm. But down at the very end, there were freight trains.
How do you have a home that's on the dilapidated side, but is nice? I bet you it was a fucking mansion compared to shit today.
They ran along the creek, the Flushing Creek.
Yeah.
They ran along the
All right, 40th Road in Flushing. Let's see if I can do this. So we got 40th Road, Flushing, Queens. Here's the creek. Let's see what we got here. So here's the creek, 39th Avenue, 37th, Roosevelt, 41st Avenue. There is no a 41st Road. 41st Road. Huh. So what was 40th Road? Probably doesn't even exist anymore. It's probably where this is. Holy shit. There were trains. Yeah, here's the trains. 120th Street, 27th Street. Huh. gonna need another goddamn map. 41st Road was here. 41st Avenue. Old map of Flushing. Oh boy. Let's see, a large one. Nope, nope, wrong one. Tools. Oh, images. Large. Oh, wow. Okay. Let's see. Main Street, right? So Main Street, I don't think we're near Main Street here. Main Street is here. Okay, so can I rotate this? I don't think I can rotate this, can I? Well, here's Main Street. So if we go north, Main Street. So are you telling me that's north? Okay, so here's Flushing Creek. First Street, Lawrence Street, Locust, Cedar, Grove, Hamilton. Oh, so this is before they were numbered. Wow. Myrtle, Orchard, Farrington. Wow. This is too old. 1873, this is. Wow. So, man. That's really cool though. Let's do like 1950. Whoops. And then we want tools, large. Oh, Flushing, New York. I mean, that's way too small, I assume. Yeah, this is still 1870s. Strange. All right, let's try one more thing. Where was 40th Road in Flushing, New York? '40th Road. I'm not. Oh, right there. Oh, this whole time it was lit, and I didn't even know. Okay, yeah. Well, I was right. This is it. So she used to live at the end of the road here, right by Flushing Creek. Now it's the Van Wyck. Wow. Okay, so 40th Road does exist. Holy crap. Wow. Somewhere around here.
Creek.
Yeah.
They ran, but down at the very end, there were freight trains that ran along the creek, the Flushing Creek.
Yeah.
Dilapidated, a lot of homes dilapidated. Her home was on the at the end of her street, way down, this very poor street area of Flushing, poor, dilapidated, a lot of homes dilapidated. Her home was on the dilapidated side, but it was nice. Mm-hmm. But down at the very end, there were freight trains that ran along the creek, the Flushing Creek.
Yeah.
They ran along the Flushing Creek, and they ended up, which is where now would be, there's a subway yard at the very end of the creek. If you see, there's like a barricade on the other side. There's a subway yard there,
yeah.
And the freight trains would run into that yard and then end up on the main line.
Yeah.
So I would go down there and go play on the trains. You could play on the trains there because you could go up on the train and play on them. You shouldn't.
So
when I was little, when I was like 10 years old, I could play on the real trains. Wow. Go down and play on them. You weren't supposed to play on them, but I wasn't doing anything too dangerous.
Was that when the third rail story happened?
No.
That was
in Woodside.
Okay.
The Long Island Railroad ran in Woodside where it is still today.
Yeah.
You can see it. And we used to play ball on the street where the overpass was.
Yeah.
All right, so he is talking about the famous third rail story. Trains, 40th Road, famous third rail story. Famous in the family.
And sometimes the ball would go down into the train.
Yeah.
And there was ways to access the train area because the trains were always, the property was always dilapidated, even to this day. You ever see trains? And all the property always looks dilapidated. They don't take care.
No.
They don't take care of the train property for some reason. Well, the train property was dilapidated. We could get through the fences and stuff. And once I went down and it was probably around 64th Street and Woodside Avenue.
All right, 64th Street and Woodside Avenue. Let's find out. I could probably do it without searching. 64th Street and Woodside Avenue. So here's Woodside. 64th is over here somewhere. Oh man, does that not even exist? 64th Street and Woodside Avenue. 74th, 49th. Yeah, the 60s are down here. Where the hell's Woodside Avenue? It's like one of these ones. 64th Street. Wow. It's like doesn't exist anymore where he plays. Well, here's a train. 61st, 62nd. Oh, here's 64th Street. Yeah, here are the trains. Where the hell's Woodside Avenue? I mean, there's Northern. Let's just follow Broadway. 64th Street. 64th, 39th. Here we go. We're getting there. This is the trains here. Yeah. 64th Street and Woodside Avenue. Yep. Man, he nailed it. Right where the trains are. Let's go in there. Wow. So the trains are down there. Let's get right on the edge. Right there. Probably an overpass. Yeah. Yeah, there's the trains there. So I guess he used to go down there somehow. That's crazy. That's where he was.
And Woodside Avenue, where the train was, where that happened. I went down to get the ball, and all I remember is here. I heard the train. I didn't know when you get confused
it'd be hard to tell
to
what's
where
coming
you
from.
are. You're not sure where you are. And all I remember was picking up the ball and running to the side where I had come from. And I ran, and I remember I heard a boom. I heard boom, and I ran, and I sort of like fell. And I heard the train whistle, and I fell like into the side there. And I could almost, I don't know if I felt it or was it my imagination, but I could feel the wind, from the train.
Yeah.
But I knew that I had just missed the train, and I looked and my sneaker was gone. It had blown off. Apparently I had hit the third rail with my sneaker. That could have first of all killed me because the electricity would have killed me.
Yeah.
But
Well, I guess it could have killed you. But the good news about that is that it was just 1 foot. Like if you stepped both feet, then it could be bad. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to underestimate or Yeah, it was probably very dangerous. Probably close to being killed.
the rubber in the sneaker insulated me so I didn't get killed. But it blew the sneaker off because the rubber hit the rail. I must have hit the third rail as I was running, and that just blew the sneaker
I
off
thought
me.
those were two separate stories. I thought you
No.
almost got hit by a train because it was like foggy. And I thought it was another time that you got
No,
your
I don't
sneaker
think
blown
so.
off. So
I
it's the
don't.
same
If it
thing.
is, I don't remember.
Okay.
All I remember
We're
is
making the same story.
I don't remember. All I remember is that the sneaker. I just missed getting. First of all, I almost got electrocuted to death, and second of all, I just got.
I almost got electrocuted to death. That's funny.
Missed getting hit by the train. I think that was the same story.
That's a different story. Okay, but
I
now
think.
let's go back to your grandmother's house at 40th Road you said you used to go down there and play with the trains because I'd asked
Well,
you
this is
why-
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I asked you why you like trains, and then you mentioned this story, but I don't know.
Yeah,
what
this
the
is
point was.
before. She lived on 40th Road, and we spent a lot of time there. And if you walk down to the end of her block, it ended at the creek. It was a dead end. The creek was there. It was the train tracks. There was like 2 train tracks. If you crossed the train tracks, it came to the creek. There was no fence. It just was just a sloping down to the creek, and you could go into the creek. Actually, you could drown. That's when my uncle used to swim there. And it was polluted even then. But he was underneath the Roosevelt Avenue Bridge. He used to swim there when he was a kid.
Wow.
And it was probably polluted then. It was with oil and stuff, and garbage and stuff. Not so much garbage, but there was like industrial.
He probably had a strong immune system.
There was industrial wastes in there, and he swam in it. Yeah, probably.
Jesus.
And I never went near there. I mean, I never went into the creek or anything. I never went down by the creek area. But you could walk to the creek if you wanted to and drown in there if you wanted to. You're a little kid.
You could drown in there if you wanted to.
Little kid. When I went out to play, when my mother was in my grandmother's house, the kids went outside to play. They didn't watch you where you were. I was playing. I was outside playing. They didn't know if I was on the train or I was playing ball or what. We used to play ball in the street.
Yeah.
There was Pete and Pop. I used to play ball with Pete and Pop.
Who's that?
There were 2 black kids that I became friends with.
Cool.
And they lived on the block.
Pete and Pop. We're talking the 50s here. That's cool. That's cool that my dad was friends with some black folks in the 50s, Man. Pre-civil rights movement. My dad's got black friends. How about that? That's awesome.
Because that's why it was poor, because it was actually the black neighborhood. They lived on the block. Because that's why it was poor, because it was actually the black neighborhood. There was still Italians on the block, my family and a couple of others, but mostly it was the blacks. It was a black neighborhood. And so Pete and Pop were there, and I was friends with them. We used to play ball with them when I was a kid. And there was also a black church near there on the corner, and I used to go sit inside the black church and listen to the gospel music.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Cool.
I was the only white person in the whole church. And maybe you go in there and maybe there were like 40 people, sometimes with 10 people, and they'd be playing gospel music, and I would sit in the back.
When you say church, like
It was a church.
Like
an Ebenezer Baptist church, a real church. Yeah, small, but a church. Plus, there was another church I used to go to, which was on Prince Street, but that
Oh, wait. I want to... Black church gospel music.
was later on when I was older. That's still there, that church. This church is gone.
Yeah.
That church is still there, the one I'm talking about on Prince Street. You want to see it one day, I'll take you there, and I'll show it to you, because it's still there. But
Prince Street.
that church is still there. Plus, there was another church I used to go to, which is on Prince Street, but that was later on when I was older. That's still there, that church. This church is gone.
Okay, let's see if we can find that. It's a Prince Street. It's got to be Queens. Prince Street, Queens. Okay. The blue line is Prince Street. Okay, so... And then we want to try, like, Baptist Church. Prince Street. I guess this is it. Ebenezer Baptist Church. Yeah. Huh. And there was another one? There was one down here? Yeah, right here. Let's drop a pin. Huh. Wow. There's the little church, and then I don't know if like this was an addition. Cool. I want to zoom in. Founded 1870. God damn. How about that? That's so cool. I wonder what this looked like then.
Plus, there was another church I used to go to, which is on Prince Street, but that was later on when I was older. That's still there, that church. This church is gone.
Yeah.
That church is still there, the one I'm talking about on Prince Street. You want to see it one day, I'll take you there, and I'll show it to you, because it's still there. But this one was right on the corner. It was a little dilapidated, very basically falling apart. The church was falling apart. It was, it needed work. It was literally, it was, you know, nails coming out of the walls and out of this wood. You know, and paint falling off the walls and stuff. It was literally really dilapidated.
Yeah.
But I used to go and listen to the music sometimes. I used to go maybe 5 times, 10 times. You know, I like the music, so I used to listen to the music.
Let me bring you back though. So we're on the street. I mentioned trains, and then you wanted to talk about 40th Street, your grandmother's.
Well, that's because that's where I got interested in
That's where
trains,
you
because
got
I could play on the trains there. You could walk down there, and there was a railroad train, and there were freight cars there. So mostly it was freight cars, but sometimes there was an engine there, a work engine.
Oh, wow.
You know what a work engine is, right?
Not really.
A work engine is not a regular kind of engine that you would think. It was sort of more utilitarian looking. It's hard to describe it. It had a long front to it with.
All right, this might actually make sense to put into the interview. 1950s work engine. Train. Yeah, I don't really know. Probably something like this. But I'm not sure. Let's see if he describes that.
With catwalks on the side that you could walk on, and then there was a carriage, a big area in the front where the carriage was, where the people drove the train.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely not this. I mean, that's your classic, you know. Thomas the Tank Engine, you know. That's pretty cool. If I could find an exact thing of what he was talking about, I'd put it in there.
A big area in the front where the carriage was, where the people drove the train.
Yeah.
I'll show you a picture of it. I'll find a picture of it. I'll show you on the iPad.
But you said like everybody was into trains.
Kids,
So-
when I was a little, all boys had electric trains.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had electric trains, and every kid was interested in trains. That was the big thing. Everybody loved trains and dinosaurs and astronomy.
But so more
Every
than
kid was
ju-
interested in
but
that.
more than just osmosis, and more. In other words, like the interest in trains was a popular thing. So it
Yeah.
was like osmosis. You sort of just
It was
caught
the thing that kids played with
Yeah,
when they were
but-
little.
but
Every
on-
kid had electric
Yeah,
trains.
but on top of that, on top of just the osmosis of it, there was also Grandma's house.
Yeah,
where you
because
could
I
see the
had
trains.
access to seeing real trains. I used to walk on the work engines sometimes, you know, and look around. Sometimes I'd get into the carriage.
Yeah.
The same with the firemen. Every kid wanted to be a fireman. And I used to go down and hang on the fire trucks. I told you, that was
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah.
I would light the fire and then ride down on the truck to put it out. But, you know, every kid was interested in firemen. He wanted to be a fireman, a cowboy. You loved trains. You loved watching the planets and interested in planets and Mars and stuff.
You used to light
Okay, here we go. All right, I think this should be its own thing. 35, 17, 16. Okay, so about 10 minutes worth. He did some trains and other shit. 35, let's say 17. 01, 35, 17. Lighting fires and putting and riding fire truck. That's funny. All right, so yeah, I remember this from the interview.
Mars and stuff.
You used to light fires and what now? What was that?
Yeah, well, I was a sort of an arsonist for a while.
Look at that face. Oh, that's funny.
Stuff.
You used to light fires and what now? What was that?
Yeah, well, I was a sort of an arsonist for a while. I was.
Wait.
I was
so
an
you would
arsonist
light
for a while.
Like you would actually light a fire and then run to
Well, this is a whole other story. You want to hear? It's a
Well, I
long
never
story.
heard this one though.
All right. Well, there
can make this
basically
one the last
was.
one
It's.
for today.
I'll go backwards. There was a place called Bamboo Island. There's a place in Woodside called the Big Six. It's a big apartment building, big apartment complex, 6 buildings.
Wait, where?
It's on Queens Boulevard.
Okay.
In Woodside. It's called the Big Six. It's been there 40 years, 50 years now, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a 6 big buildings. It was the first time they had a big, what was it called? What's the name called?
Condominium?
No, when you call those apartment
cooperative?
complexes, what are they called? There's a name for them, you know.
Cooperatives? Or
No, like
plazas?
Co-op City, but there's a name for big apartment complexes. I can't think of it right now. Anyway,
The projects, I think.
it was
is what
called
we-
Bamboo Island. It was an empty lot, big empty lot, big area because it held these 6 buildings later on when they built them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was an empty lot, but they called it Bamboo Island because there was these bamboo. It looked like a plant looked like bamboo. That's what it looked like. I don't know if it was really bamboo, but it was this. The bottom of it was about this big. Then it would get slender, and it would be like about 10 feet
I
tall,
love that he's just.
and it looked like bamboo. It had big
I love that he's just in his pajamas.
leaves and stuff. And when you walked in there, after you went into the empty lot after about like 20 feet, you could walk into like a jungle. You couldn't be seen. I'm serious. You would walk in there, and then you'd be in the bamboo, and you couldn't be seen from the house, from the street.
Good place to kill someone.
Well,
I was just thinking that.
that's it. There was violence in there. There were rapes in there. There
Oh,
was
Jesus.
violence. There were people, having sex, in there when they weren't supposed to. There was you would find articles of clothing and stuff.
So when people talked about Bamboo Island, it came with this sort
Bamboo
of
Island had a
reputation.
reputation of being a place you shouldn't really go into, and and I was just,
Of course.
you never went there alone. I was always with friends, but we
I mean, Bamboo Island sounds so pleasant. It's so pleasant sounding. Oh, we're gonna go down to Bamboo Island.
We would go sometimes. First of all, it was a long walk from Nana's house all the way to Bamboo Island because you had to go down all the way down to Queens Boulevard, and then you had to walk like about at least a good 4 or 5 blocks down towards Manhattan to get to Bamboo Island. So it was a little bit of a walk. But I was still in elementary school when I went there, when I first started going there. We used to go there and play because it was like, it was adventurous to go. You wanted to be on the edge. We did a lot of things that kids wouldn't do today because it's too dangerous. But we did it then. We didn't realize how dangerous it was. We wanted adventure.
Yeah.
So we went there, and it was adventurous because you could walk through the bamboo. There was these trails through the bamboo, and you could walk. And by the time you got to the other end, there must have been about 3 football fields.
Wow.
You were all the way at the other end, and you didn't even know. Basically, it was hard even to find your way back because it was so dense.
Yeah.
It was all these weeds and this stuff, and you really couldn't be seen. It was a very strange place, to be honest. And you would find articles of clothing, bras, and panties and stuff, and knives, and a lot of bottles, whiskey bottles thrown on broken whiskey bottles and stuff.
So I'm taking it you set fire to some of this.
So basically, what we would do is
I'm trying to reel him in.
we would end up. Sometimes we'd make camp there. Because there was also dog do in there, a lot of dog do. There was no laws against dogs. Dogs would go in the street then. You wouldn't pick up after them. So there was some dog do too.
Wow.
So you'd have to wait, but sometimes you'd make camp there. And sometimes you'd end up with a lot of garbage. So what you do is, sometimes you'd get a lot of garbage together and you light a fire. So you would light the fire. And then what we would do is, we knew the fireman over on 60, that's where Danny works there now,
Oh,
David's
wow.
friend.
Wow.
Oh, no shit. That's crazy.
But the firehouse was on 61st Street and on the corner of Woodside of 65th Place. And when I say 61st Street, I'm wrong. 65th Place, which was known as Street, and Queens Boulevard. That's where the firehouse was, not 61st Street.
Okay.
61st Street was Bamboo Island.
I see.
So we would walk from Bamboo Island back to the fire. So we'd already set the fire. Sometimes it would take and would get bigger, where you could see the smoke above the bamboo, but sometimes it would just go out. So we would light the fire. We'd walk back to the fire. So we'd just sort of hang around because the fireman knew us. Hey kids, how you doing? There was a jump seat in the pumper truck, the truck that had the pumps on it. It had a jump seat, which was the seat where you could just take a handle and sit in it without a door. You could just sort of sit there. Sometimes the fireman would let me sit in the truck in the station. But it got to be the point where I knew the firemen so much that they'd even say, "You want to come for, it's a short ride. You want to come for a ride on the truck?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So they'd actually let me ride on the truck. But a lot of times they didn't realize that we would set the fire, and then when the smoke went above the bamboo, they would have to be called because the people would complain and saw the smoke. So I would walk. By the time I walked back, then the smoke would go up, and I would say, "Can I ride on the truck?" So I would be in the truck. They would drive down to there, and they would get the pumper truck out and shoot, put the fire out in like in 2 seconds because it was just a small fire. But I was the one that started the fire.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
They didn't
So
realize that.
You would set the fire.
I would set the fire.
Go get the firemen to the
Walk
fire that
back
you
to.
set.
By the time I walked to the firehouse, the fire had spread. And then they would let me ride on the truck. So I knew I was going to get a ride because I knew they were going to get the call.
Wow.
So they didn't know that I knew they were going to get the call.
That's great.
So I would just hang around, oh, you want to come for a ride? And so it was 4 blocks.
Yeah.
So I would ride down the 4 blocks. They'd put the fire out, and then we'd drive back. It would take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd drive back, thanks guys, oh, you're so good, you're so nice to me and everything, and then I'd go. Now, it progressed on Queens Boulevard, there were a lot of empty lots.
Yeah.
So we would end up lighting the billboards sometimes on fire. Because there were a lot of these huge billboards, ones you could walk in the back of them. Because we would play there. We would go up to the top of the billboard, which was like about 20 feet
Jesus.
high.
I'm afraid of heights too.
Yeah, but not 20 feet. I was okay there. But you could play on them.
Yeah.
And then there was an empty lot right at the top of Nona Street. You go up the street on 60th Place to Woodside Avenue. Cat corner right on the same side of the street as Nona's house, across Woodside Avenue, there was an empty lot.
Yeah.
All right, let's find that empty lot real quick. I know exactly where he's talking about. So, 65th Place and Woodside Avenue, up the hill. Yeah, that's north, I think. So, 65th Place and Woodside Avenue. Let's see. Long Island City, past it. All right, 69th Street. So right around here somewhere. I think Woodside's a little bit south. No, not too far. I'm like in the vicinity. Hang on. I'm in the vicinity. I'm trying to do this by memory. 62nd. 63rd. 65th Road. All right, it's right around here. Oh, wow, yeah. Where the hell is 65th Place? Queens, 65th Place, 65th Road, 64th Road. Oh, this is bugging me. Yeah, that's Queens for you. 65th Road, 65th Ave, 65th Place. All right. I thought I could find it. So, I was way off. I was way off. Okay. I got it. So my dad used to live like here's Broadway, or was it Roosevelt Avenue? Roosevelt Avenue's this way, 65th Road. Where's 65th Place? Here we go. Yeah, this was the road he lived on. He lived right around here. In fact, I could just show you their house. I forget the address, but let's see. So that's down the hill. I think it's this house here. No, not yet. It might be this house. Yeah, just before. I think it's this house. Oh, they changed it. Ugh, my mom would know. Let me. Fuck it. So he's saying up the hill. Let's see what he says.
Cat corner right on the same street on.
Yeah.
And then there was an empty lot right at the top of Nona Street. You go up the street on 60th Place to Woodside Avenue.
Okay. So Woodside Avenue must be south then. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go up the street to Woodside Avenue on the same side. So that's looking down the hill. So up the street. Oh man, these roads are so small. On the same side of Nona's Papa's house, right here, across the street here was an empty lot. So he's talking about right here. Now it's, you could tell, that these are newer houses. These are like apartments, really. So right now he's talking about this right here.
And then there was an empty lot right at the top of Nona Street. You go up the street on 60th Place to Woodside Avenue. Cat corner, right on the same side of the street as Nona's house, across Woodside Avenue, there was an empty lot.
Yeah.
We used to play ball there. We had an improvised little ball field there. But sometimes we would break the person's windows, unfortunately, because there was a window and the ball would hit the window, and everybody would run. But there was this big tree that was down.
What would you say? What was the word at the time if you did the, like, scram?
Yeah, something like that. You would break the window and run. So there was this big tree that had fallen down, and so there was the big billboard facing Woodside Avenue, but there was a big tree in the middle, and we would play on the tree. I think we did something with the tree. But anyway, every once in a while, we'd light that billboard on fire. I could say once a month or something.
Yeah.
And then the firemen would come, and it wouldn't damage it that much. The billboard was sturdy. It was these big planks of wood. You couldn't really burn and knock it down or anything.
Yeah.
It wouldn't burn, but the firemen would have to come. And I remember once I was waiting for the bus or something where I was coming home from school or something, and I had an umbrella and it was raining.
Yeah.
And I was, mischievous or something. And I went over to the billboard and I was playing with the billboard. The billboard was right near the street by the sidewalk. And I was taking the umbrella, the end of the umbrella, the metal part, and I was scraping the billboard on the side, making a hole like in the paper.
Yeah.
And a cop comes down,
shit.
walking down. He goes, "Hey, kid, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I was just playing here." And he goes, "Get out of here. Don't you see you're making a mess of the thing?" And I go, "Oh, I'm sorry." He goes, "Where do you live?" I said, "Well, I just live right here.
Yeah.
I just live down the block. Oh, get over to get to your house or something." I remember that distinctly because it scared me. Yeah, because the cop was big and he had this big raincoat, these big raincoats on with the rain hat thing. It was like, I'm like this big and he's like this big. How are you doing there?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was guilty. I was scraping. For some stupid reason, I was just scraping because I was a stupid kid, I was scraping the paper.
This is great. I just want to kind of write this down. Lighting fires, riding fire truck, general mischief. Is that how you spell that? No, that's not right. General mischief. Okay.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, I remember that, but we used to light a lot of fires. So I guess I was an arsonist for a while.
That's funny.
And I did do that and then Bamboo Island eventually became, they leveled it and made the Big Six, and that's been there since the 60s.
Wow.
Been there a long time.
Huh.
And that billboard, the one on Woodside Avenue, they built houses there, probably in the 60s too.
Yeah.
That billboard hasn't been there since the 50s.
Yeah. Just a reminder, he's talking about right here. So apparently there was some sort of billboard around this area. RTA Travel. I can't believe they're still there, because that was there when I was a kid. I remember seeing that every time we'd pass to go to my grandparents' house. Man, I should drive over there, just walk around.
Yeah. So when did you get your first model train?
Well,
Okay, 4325. So that was a good little section there. 01, 43, 25. Oh, 01, 43, 25. It looks like we're about to talk about model trains. Lionel trains.
Yeah. So when did you get your first model train?
Well, I was interested in trains, like all kids were, and I got my first. Papa bought me a train set when I was little, about 52 maybe, or 53.
Oh,
okay. Early. And then Uncle Caesar, God bless him one way or the other, his Christmas present to me was always a train car.
Some kind of
he would buy me a car,
piece of
one car.
Yeah,
one car. He would buy me one car. That was usually what I was expecting that from him. He would always buy me a train car. So I ended up with a pretty big collection.
This was Lionel.
A Lionel train. He would buy me a car, and then I'd add to it occasionally. And then the last time I put them up was in '64, and then hoping that I would.
The last time he put them up was 1964. I have those trains. They're in the attic. The last time he put them up was 1964. He never put them up again. 2023 minus 1964. 59 years.
Eventually would have some room in a house someplace where I ended up, where I'd be able to put them up again. I never did. And then when I worked in Macy's, I ended up getting some more track. from when I worked in Macy's back probably about 67, and the 64 was the last time I put them up. In 67, I had added some track because I got from Macy's, and then Lewis, Mom's cousin Lewis, had some trains, and he got rid of them, and I took his. I took some of his, so it sort of like built up to a bigger set than what I.
That's interesting because at some point I'm going to get those trains down and catalog them or something. So he had ones from before 64, then he got some at new, I guess, from Macy's in 67, then he picked some other ones up. So it's like 3 different collections together. Good to know.
I had.
64 was the last time.
64 was the last time they ran, yeah.
Wow, crazy.
Imagine that, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, 64.
Yep.
You were 18?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 18.
No, I was, no.
64?
I was,
46.
I was, yeah, 18.
56?
18.
Yeah, 18.
18, yeah. I had every intention to put them up again.
Yeah.
And I had started on in 67, especially when I had gotten the extra track from Macy's, I figured I'm in the real Macy's, not Uncle Dom's Macy's.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I got.
So he's talking about his Uncle Dom, who was a garbage man who used to just take trash that rich people would throw out and bring it home. They referred to Uncle Dom picking those things up at Macy's, even though it wasn't really Macy's.
Macy's, not Uncle Dom's Macy's.
Figured, yeah.
I expected to put them on because I was still living in Papa and Nana's house, but I just never did. Never put them up again.
Yeah. I think I'm going to call it right now, but I want to do this again at some point because I definitely want to eventually.
But we're only up to what, about?
Well, that's the thing.
19,
we're about
1960 maybe or something.
For almost 2 hours. So we're only up to like,
All right, this is where actual editing comes in. So I'm not entirely sure I want to keep all of this because eventually I'm going to put this up on YouTube for like family reasons. So if this is kind of, well, it's only a minute of talking, so maybe I'll keep it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to call it right now, but
Okay, so let me actually document this too. So 01 45 12 and then 01 45 12 is wrapping up first segment, I guess we could call it. I don't know if there's more. We'll have to look because then we'll have to do some editing. You can see there's like some audio shit here that I got to remember what I did.
I think I'm going to call it right now, but I want to do this again at some point because I definitely want to eventually.
But we're only up to what, about?
Well, that's the thing.
We're about 1960 maybe or something.
For almost 2 hours.
Check.
So we're only up to like, high school.
1960-ish. And I never talked about my mother's family yet either. There's a lot to talk about them if you want to hear about them. There's like an hour's worth of talking just about my mother's family.
We could do that. Well, I have to pee again, honestly.
Well, it's a long story. Let's quit now.
You want to quit for now and then we'll.
Well, let's. You can continue later maybe.
Well,
today.
No, because I'm going to break everything down, I think.
Well, if you want to talk about her family, it takes at least an hour. So let's do it again sometime
All right, yeah, so
in the future.
Just for me, if I watch this, we're going to pick it up at Nana's family.
Well, we're going to pick it up. It's it's around 1960-ish, I guess, when I first started high school.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about my mother's family.
Nana's family. And I think eventually, this might even be the next session. I want to talk about you getting into teaching and the boys and all that stuff.
Okay.
But I guess we'll get to that. But okay, good day one for this.
Good.
Right, cutting. Okay, so
Yeah,
I guess we'll start from the beginning.
Jesus, stop. I'll leave all of that in. I think that's fine. I mean, I think eventually this will be one long file. Let's save it. What time is it? And I got a text message. Oh no. My friend is sick. Okay, so I think yeah, you know what? I was thinking I would do a second timeline and throw it on there, but I want it to be one long thing because I want to keeping notes with this time code in mind. So where does this end? 146.15. Okay. So what did I do here with the audio? Looks like I doubled it up. So this,
I expected to put them in because I was still living in Palm.
and this must be me.
But I just never did.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna call it right now, but I want to do this again at some.
Okay, and I think like the next time I do it, I might have switched up some stuff. So this might not make the most sense to keep this same thing. But so yeah, it looks like we got. Oh man, do I even have those things transcoded? It looks like there might be one more clip.
High school, I suppose. Then, is there any? Unless there's anything else from.
So I made.
Oh no, this is 00005. Okay. So the end of this is just us wrapping it up, right?
True.
Just for me, if I watch this.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done. We're done with that. So we want to go now to interview 2. Looks like it is also transcoded. I guess I had to transcode it. So what does this sound like? Ugh, there's no audio. I think I got everything. Okay, there's some audio issues here. And I can't play this, can I? I think I can't? Why can't I? Why did I end up transcoding this? So this doesn't have audio. That's annoying. This is editing.
For the house, and he was constantly taking money from me and Stella.
Okay, so is there any reason why I don't want to use the MTS files? I think
Hey, good day one.
I got everything. Squeeze in here. I transcoded them for some reason.
But I don't even know what school it would have been.
Yeah. What was public school like at that time? From the time you were there?
Looking back on it, I would say we got a pretty good education.
I guess I'm just going to use the raw. I don't see why I would have to do that. The only thing I can think of is that like when I go to export this, it's going to be a pain in the ass. And that would suck. Well, hopefully nothing happens. So what I'm going to do here, you can see and hear how there, it looks like I am on
The kids don't.
the left track and Dad's on the right.
Are we going to be peeing often again?
The other thing I believe I did was put some filters on the audio. Let me see here. Looks like I have. Looks like I EQ'd it a bit.
It takes at least an hour, so let's do it again.
I wrote it down right here.
I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, there's like a little bit of an EQ on each of these, I guess. So first thing I'll do is. Are these connected? No, none of these are connected. That's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is. Copy this. Well, actually, the first thing I'm going to do is unlink them. So now these two are unlinked. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it there. And the next thing I want to do is, it looks like I put dad. Looks like dad's in the top tracks. So let me think about this. So if dad is in, let's mute this for now. If dad is in the
Check.
What was I up to?
dad's on the right. So when I want to make this dad, I gotta go to audio channels. He's on the right. So I want the left channel to be also the right. Okay. Now if I listen to this, it should just be dad.
What was I up to?
Yep. And now for this one, same thing but the other way. I am on the left, so audio channel. I want the right to also be the left. So let's do that. Okay.
The last time.
And then if I solo this,
I wrote it down right here.
I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh, you do. The last thing you said.
okay. Now I'll just put the same EQ that I had. So why are there two? Oh, okay. So there's an EQ, and there's also a compressor, I believe. So let's just put both of these on here. We'll copy, and for dad, paste. Okay, and let's hear. I think I can hear the difference, right? If I do, yeah. So this is before.
Check.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it.
It's very boomy. Let me mute this one. Down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Okay, and now with the EQ on, hopefully it still sounds good.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, that's better. It's so much more like a boom, 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 high mids.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something. What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, that's definitely way better. That took me a long time the first time. And then the compressor should keep everything around the same level. Let's put that on there as well. Okay, so let's hear it.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
You can't see it, but if I show you the levels over here on the right hand side over here, you watch these levels. This will be before the compressor.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down.
You can see it's like a lot of this. You know, it's like, now what was I up to the last time? There's a big gap between like the lowest volume and the highest volume. Let's listen to it again.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
You can see that, right? And it's also not as loud. So now hopefully this fixes that with the compressor on. Now I dialed the compressor in before. So I'm like saving myself work by just copying and pasting. Thankfully, it's a very similar setup because this was done probably weeks or months later.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it
See, now it's much closer, those ups and downs.
down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, that looks great. So that's good. That takes care of a lot of work because I won't have to do it again. But I know going forward in future interviews, we're in different setups, different locations, and probably different equipment. So I might need to redo the compressor for that. Now, did I put any effects on me? No, I didn't put any effects on me, which is fine. But let's listen to me. Let's solo myself.
I wrote it down right here.
Because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family. And that,
Let's put the see, this is a different setup. I didn't have this the last time. Let's put the compressor on me as well. Hell, I might even do the equalizer too. Do them both. Let me hear the difference now.
oh, you do. The last thing you
Alright, it's overmodulating. So let me go in here. How do I do this? Edit. It would be make.
you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, You said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. I could talk about them for an hour.
I don't know. I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say.
Yeah, oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour.
I want me to be slightly lower than him. Okay, that's good. All I did was lower the makeup there. That's basically the final gain stage. So that's good. All right, and I wonder if I should also put the same equalization on it. Let's see if that sounds any different. I have a very similar voice to my dad. Probably won't be too bad. It might sound a little bit more tinny, but I think that's better than booming. Let's hear.
Yeah, oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. Yeah, oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour.
I mean, an audio file would definitely not be happy, but I think it sounds okay. Let's listen to both together now.
You said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. I could talk about
really,
them for an hour.
I don't know. I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about them.
Well, you did say.
All right, so both of them together are overmodulating. So I think what I'm gonna do is lower the makeup on both a little bit more.
Oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. I could talk about them for an hour.
I don't know. I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about them.
Well, you did say, and I just watched it.
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the last thing that you could talk to them for an hour.
Did I?
Yeah.
My mother's family or my father's?
You said my mother's family, and that's going to take. If you want to talk about my mother's family, it's going to take an hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to take an hour.
'Cause
but
we
I
already-
also wanted to talk about the games we used to play.
Okay.
I could talk about them for an hour.
I don't know. I don't know that much about them, but
Dad sounds lower. Let me see. Let me bring him back up. What was it, like 15? And then me, I'll lower me even more. Maybe I don't need the limiter for me. I mean the compressor.
something that I thought of later.
Yeah, oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. I could talk
Yeah, but
about
really,
them for an hour.
I don't.
Well, I think maybe what's happening is his compressor is compressing my background audio. You know, because you can hear me on his. So I wonder, do I just mute myself? Let me see what happens if I just mute myself.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour. I could
Yeah,
talk
but
about-
really, I don't know. I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about
Well,
them.
you did say, and I just...
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the...
All right, I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna lower this down just a little bit, and I'm just gonna keep my track muted. I think. Who cares how good I sound? So I think instead of muting it here, I'm just going to click it and do enable. That just turns it off completely.
What was
Because otherwise, I mean, the best way to do it would be to like mute Dad's track when I'm talking, and then unmute it. You know what I mean? That would be like the best audio for both. But this is not an interview with me. You don't see me. I can totally be off camera. And plus, with this compressor, it's bringing me up too, I think. So that's fine.
what was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah, oh, you do. The last...
So now this also this is like candidacy for being just edited out. Us talking about where we're going to pick it up. I think I'm going to watch this for a bit and figure out like where it actually starts. I think there is going to be a proper like, we're back. This is so many days later, so many months later. we last left off. So I just started to hit record just for my own sake. So I'm going to be looking for that start point, and then we're just going to bring it over. Maybe just do a fade out, fade in. I might put text up because at the beginning of this we did this. Okay, so I guess we'll start from the beginning. You want to just say, I guess my question is, just tell me your life story.
Get there, ladies and gentlemen. Show business is my life.
You know what? Just since I'm here, I'll copy that. And let's move back to where we were. And we're looking for a starting point.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Now, did I keep the, yeah, the EQ's still on. Good.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour.
Yeah, but really, I don't know if I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about
Well,
them.
you did say, and I just...
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the last thing that you could talk to them for an hour.
Did I?
Yeah.
My mother's family or my father's?
You said my mother's family, and that's going to take... If you want to talk about my mother's family, it's going to take an hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to take an hour, but I also wanted to talk about...
Let me just make sure that's what he said.
Family.
Well, we're going to pick it up. It's it's around 1960-ish, I guess, when I first started high school.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about my mother's family.
Nona's family. And I think eventually, this might even be the next session. I want to talk about you getting into teaching and the boys and all that stuff.
Okay.
Too. But I guess we'll get to that. But okay, good day one for this.
If you want to talk about her family, it takes at least an hour. So let's later, maybe.
Well,
Today.
No, because I'm going to break everything down, I think.
Well, if you want to talk about her family, it takes at least an hour. So let's do it again
all
sometime.
right, yeah.
Weird. Okay, I'm also gonna zhuzh this back over to here. Don't need to see all that crap. All right. Well, then I don't want to. You know, this part where he seems confused, I don't need to keep in there. Also, would like to know when we shot this. I think I must say it. So let's.
Yeah, but really, I don't know I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about
Well,
them.
you did say, and I just...
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the last thing you could talk to them for an hour.
Did I?
Yeah.
My mother's family or my father's?
You said my mother's family, and that's going to take... If you want to talk about my mother's family, it's going to take an hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to take an hour, but I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play. The kids don't play the games we used to play when I was a kid, that they should be mentioned because they were wonderful games and we used to play them outside. They were some of them all kids played and some we just invented, I think. And we had a lot of fun playing them, outdoor ball games and stuff.
Yeah, talk about it.
I'd like to mention that.
Yeah, of course. Go for it. What was the best one?
Well, there was a lot of them. One wasn't better. The stickball was the most common one.
How did the rules of stickball?
All right, I guess I never did that. So, I guess the starting point is just right here.
Hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to take an hour, but I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play.
Okay.
You said my mother's family, and that's going to take... If you want to talk about my mother's family, it's going to take an hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to take an hour, but I also...
Of course, I didn't give myself a good starting point here. I don't need any of that. So let's see.
Take an hour, but I also wanted to talk about the games. I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play. The kids don't play, but I also wanted to talk about the. I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play.
The problem with putting an edit here is that in the future, someone might see this and be like, what did he edit out? Because it's obviously coming in the middle. So now I don't know. How long is this?
I think I got everything. Nice. Check.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right.
Maybe I'll just keep it all in.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was... You said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour.
Yeah, but really, I don't know I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about
Well,
them.
you did say, and I just...
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the last thing that you could talk to them for an hour.
Did I?
Yeah.
All right, you know what? I guess we're leaving it in. What I want to find out is what the hell date this was. Actually, let me just do this. we're gonna go here. I'm gonna do a full fade to black here, and we're gonna come up from black here. And I want to put, let's see, is it still, nope. That's stupid. It's stupid that when you cut something, it automatically like copies it for some reason. Oh, I didn't want this edit here. Whatever. Okay, so now we want to paste that.
Right, cutting.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I
Now, I guess I don't need his name again, because I was at the beginning. But what I will do is I'll keep this exact, I want that, And this might be different, March 26th. So, pretty sure I have the date just where this thing is saved. So it is Casa Archives. Oh, it wasn't that much long afterwards. So it was just about a month later. That's cool. So April 22nd, 2017. April 22nd. And yeah, we would have celebrated his birthday at that point because his birthday's March 28th. So he would be 72, which is pretty cool. Let me just make sure. So it was 2017. He was born in 1946. 71. Wait a minute. So I was wrong in the first one then. Because his birthday is March 28th. So if this was March 26th, he wouldn't have been 71 yet. Let me just make sure. Let's see. Yeah, he wasn't 71 yet. Right? Yeah, I think so. So technically, he was still 70 here.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Should there be a comma? The comma looks weird to me there. It's not really noticeable. April 22nd, 2017, age 72, interviewed by Sun. Yeah, too many damn commas. Let's go back and fix this first one, too. Yeah, right? Because, wait a minute. 2017 minus 1946, 71. So in March 26th, it's technically would be 2016 minus 1946 and 70. Yeah, okay. So, wow. We were 2 days shy of his... That's why I was probably visiting, because it was his birthday. Okay, so...
Good.
Right, cutting.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh.
Yep. Okay, so he was 70 then, and now he's 71. Cool.
What was I up to the last time?
I wrote it down right here.
Okay, because I wanted to add something that I thought of later.
Yeah. Oh, you do. The last thing you said that you wanted to do was, you said, I never talked about my mother's family, and that's an hour.
Yeah, but really, I don't know if I don't know that much about them, but I'll just say a little bit about
Well,
them.
you did say. And
I don't know very much about them.
But you said in the last thing that you could talk to them for an hour.
Did I?
Yes.
My mother's family or my father's?
You said my mother's family, and that's going to take. If you want to talk about my mother's family, it's going to take an hour. That's what you said.
I don't want to it'll take an hour. But I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play. The kids don't play the games we used to play when I was a kid.
All right, let's start documenting. So it starts at same as there. 01, 46, 15 to somewhere. It's just like opening confusion. Games kids would play.
What was I up to? I also wanted to talk about the games we used to play. The kids don't play the games we used to play when I was a kid, that they should be mentioned because they were wonderful games and we used to play them outside. They were some of them all kids played and some we just invented, I think. And we had a lot of fun playing them, outdoor ball games and stuff.
Yeah, talk about it.
I'd like to mention that.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't done any color correction for any of these. But, like, they definitely should be brighter, right? Did I do color correction for this? I don't see anything on it. Yeah, maybe I'll do that at the end. This looks green. I think this looks green because there was a big green tree outside the window.
I don't want to... And some we just invented, I think. And we had a lot of fun playing them, outdoor ball games and stuff.
Yeah, talk about it.
I'd like to mention that.
Yeah, of course. Go for it. What was the best one?
Well, there was a lot of them. One wasn't better. The stickball was the most common one.
How did the rules of stickball work?
Basically like baseball, almost exactly like baseball.
And where you played it, in the street?
Played it in the street, but we didn't play much where we were because we were on a hill. Two reasons were against it. Two things were against it. We were on a hill, and there was too much traffic to play. You really had to play in a place where there wasn't a lot of traffic. So we played stickball in a park, usually only. We didn't play it in the street, but we did play a lot of games in the street though.
And what did you use for the stick?
Is this on?
It's rolling. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was on.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it wasn't on.
Oh no, it's on. Sorry, I should have said we're rolling.
Okay, so we played, well, I don't know what I started off from the last time was, but I did want to mention the games.
Yeah.
We played a lot of games. When it was warm out, we would spend most of our time outside. Kids never stayed inside. Everybody was outside. Not like today where they all inside. Today, in those days, we spent 12 hours outside.
Yeah.
And depending on how old you were, you played certain games. And all the games mostly centered around the Spalding.
What's a Spalding?
A Spalding was a orangey, reddish, sometimes orangey, reddish, pinkish rubber ball that was about this big.
All right. We've come time again to see if we can find a picture of what the hell he's talking about. Spalding. Oh, yeah. A handball. Basically a pink handball. Okay. It's fine by me. Spalding. But these say Spalding. Wait a minute. I'm confused now. Spalding or Spalding? Huh. Interesting. Maybe they called it Spalding because they're Italian. Pass me the Spalding. Interesting.
The brand name?
And the Spalding, I-N-G, Spalding.
Oh, I-N-G, Spalding.
Country, spelled with I-N-D. Company used to make them. They were called Spaldings. Instead of I-N-G, they would be pronounced like I-N-E.
Yeah.
Spaldings. S-I.
Interesting. See, that's something that's probably lost to time because I think you see that shit and you go Spalding. But apparently they were pronounced Spaldings. How about that?
I-N-E-S. Spaldings, but they were really the Spalding company. They make baseball gloves today.
Yeah.
They still in business. It's a big company. But they were called Spaldings, and that's what you played with. You only played with Spaldings, nothing else. It was a very tight rubber ball that bounced pretty high. It could bounce maybe, if you bounced it really high, hit it high on the ground high, it would go about maybe 12 feet high. And that's what we played with. And we played mostly on a hill with a lot of traffic, so we had to play different type variations of stickball because you couldn't really play stickball. And there was some really good games. A lot of them, there were two different types of games. One was based on baseball and one was based on handball.
Just want to write down. Okay, stickball. Spalding. Let's make a comma there.
So the girls would play handball mostly. And then a variation of handball was box ball. The boxes of the sidewalks, you would hit one to the other box.
Yeah.
That's the
Sorry to interrupt all these, but I do want to just keep track. Handball, box ball.
way you would play. Hit the ball back and forth, and then if you missed or you hit all outside the box, you lost. That was a point against you. The girls would play Russian handball too. That would be, you would hit a ball against the side of a house, and you would keep hitting. It was almost like squash, but with your hand. That was called Russian handball. The girls usually played that, and they played box ball.
I know, like, in the future, I'm just writing down because, like, I know I'm going to have to. I just feel like it's important to write down the names.
The boys didn't play that as much. The boys would mostly play handball, which was really, we would go pretty far away from each other. We would just try to hit the ball with our hands. We didn't even use a paddle. But the boys also played variations of baseball. One was called curveball. On one side of the curb, you'd make a little base with chalk, and on the other side of the curb, you'd make two bases. There was only a first base and a second base. There was no third base.
Curb ball. Okay.
And that was the diamond. The pitcher would stand in the street in the middle of the two curbs and throw the ball like this. You try to flip it to the batter. The batter was used his hand, and the batter then would try to hit the ball between the two bases.
Jesus. You know, I made him put on a collared shirt so I could get the microphone on him. I should have told him to wear pants too, you know, but I wanted to make sure he was comfortable. But good Lord. He's comfortable, all right.
Bases. If you hit on the outside of the bases, it was foul. Hit the ball between the two bases. But you had to hit the ball in the ground. You couldn't hit the ball in the air. Oh. If you hit the ball in the air before it hit the curb, the pitcher or one of the fielders could catch it. So you had a first baseman, you had a middle fielder, and you had the pitcher. You had three people. The four people would play, basically. It was the three fielders, and it was the four fielders. It was the catcher, the first baseman, the middle fielder, and the pitcher. So four people, and then the batter. So the batter would try to hit the ball and get a base hit. He would try to hit the ball between the fielders and get a base hit and run to first base. Yeah. But if the ball was caught, if a ball was in the street, you could catch it. If the ball went over the curb, it was out of bounds. It was a do-over.
Huh.
You couldn't hit the ball over the other curb. So you would try to hit the ball down as fast as you could. The pitcher would try to flip it to you and try to make it move a little bit, like flip it or try to make it skid or turn it backwards if they could. Yeah. And you put English on the ball. That was what was called English. Yeah. You try to put English on the ball. And then the batter would try, and the batter would get two strikes and they were out. Oh, okay. And then you would try, and then you would play a whole 9-inning game. That was called curveball. Then you'd play stoop ball.
All right. I'm putting a capital B because I feel like it.
Stoop ball was you would stand in front of your stoop or your steps in front of your house or wherever house you were playing with. The batter, the person with the ball, would throw the ball against the steps. The best thing to do would be to try to hit right at the corner of the step, where the step was at the corner, and try to hit the ball and make it go farther into the street. Now you're facing the street, and you would have to catch it. And if you hit it hard enough and it hit the house across the street, that was a home run. Nice. But there was only one fielder. Sometimes you play with two fielders, but you would just try to hit the ball against the steps, let it go to the street, and they would try to play the ball. If you played the ball, you were out.
But you're just throwing it at the steps.
You were throwing it at the steps.
Yeah, you weren't hitting a bat.
No, with your hand in the ball. That's simple. And you would throw it against the house, and there would be no running involved. You would just say it's a double or a triple, depending on the type of ball that was hit, and if it was a home run or if it was an out. Yeah. And that was all. And it was called stoop ball, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, you could play for an hour, 2 hours even sometimes. Yeah. Curveball, you could play curveball. Sometimes you could play for 2 hours, and it was great. Sometimes you'd have somebody designated umpire sometimes if you had an extra kid around. Yeah. We very rarely played stickball. Stickball was where basically it was set up like a baseball field, and you'd use a broomstick. And we would usually play that in the park because there wasn't enough room and where we were to play. But you basically just use a broomstick and a spalding, and you'd hit the ball like baseball. There'd be infielders and outfielders and stuff, and that was about it. And it was.
You ever do the ghost man on first or ghost man on second?
Yeah, sometimes you had to do that. You had to do that with a lot of games where you didn't have enough players, so there would be like if you hit the ball, and let's say there was only one runner, and he got a double. He got a single, let's say, and then the next guy got. But I'm getting confused. But you didn't have enough runners, so you would put the ghost runner on the second base and the first runner on first base. But you knew that there was a runner, supposedly a runner on that other base. It was, I guess you call it a ghost runner. We didn't call it that.
We called it ghost man.
We didn't call it that. We called it something else. But basically, the extra. You knew that guy was on the base, even though he wasn't there really in real life.
Except he couldn't do anything. Like he was just like. You know, he couldn't like lead off and steal. Ghost men could never steal. You know, it was only a.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we played another game, which I don't even know if it had a game. It was a variation of stickballs. Where at the ballparks, we had the big walls to play handball.
Yeah.
You draw the box and you try to strike. If you threw a strike into the box, if you threw a ball into the box, it was a strike. Mm-hmm. If it was outside the box, it was a walk. And you'd use a broomstick. Nice. And you would hit the ball with the broomstick, and you try to strike the person out, and you'd have outfielders. But usually they were enclosed in fences because you were playing handball, and you didn't want the ball to get lost, and you couldn't really hit the ball that far because the fences were pretty close to you. Yeah. So it was a little bit confined. Sometimes you'd play with an outfielder outside the fence if you wanted to. If you had a good hitter, he could hit the ball over the fence, and you'd position your outfielder over the fence, outside of the fence, funny. And they could catch the ball if it went over.
Yeah, but if you were the batter and you were good and you would and the defense would put their person outside, then you would aim to hit the fence then, so that he would have to come inside and get the ball. You know.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not exactly sure.
That's good strategy right there.
But anyway, we would spend hours and hours playing those games: handball, box ball, stoop ball, curveball, and we had so much fun. It was the most fun we had, and. We played for hours outside. We would spend all day outside, basically. We would never. Then we would hang out on the porches, hang out on the stoops. You'd hang out. It's called hanging out. You'd hang out. When you weren't playing, you'd hang out on the porch and you'd talk. Yeah. And just hang out. And then sometimes we'd be like in the back. When we were really smaller, we would be inventive. Like we'd play in the back. You'd play ball, play doctor. Even though it wasn't dirty, we'd just play doctor. Yeah. Or play school. Someone was the teacher. Yeah. One time, we also played this, we had this boat game. We would just take pieces of wood. My garage was full of wood. No, had a bunch of wood. Yeah. So we would take wood and we would make it in the shape of a ship, of like a canoe or a boat. Yeah. And you'd sit inside the boat. You'd get like a couple of little chairs or little benches and you put them in there, and that's your boat. You're in the boat. That's cool. And you play a game like that's the boat. Outside of the wood is the water.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I don't know how we played, but we played boat that way. And we'd make up games that we were in a boat. I don't even remember. Sometimes we play in the alleyway, which wasn't not good because Agnes would complain. It was noisy. Yeah. And if you played ball in the alleyway, it did make a lot of noise, and I admit that. So, but she would, someone would complain, Mrs. Zelenz or Agnes, so somebody would complain, and then you after a while, you got tired of being yelled at, so you'd stop playing. But we would play ball sometimes in the alleyway too.
What park did you used to go to? I mean, you weren't in many
when we played. We didn't play in the park until we were older. Mm-hmm. And one of the parks we played was in St. Michael's Park. It was a cemetery, but there was a baseball park next to it. It's a public park next to it, with those black fences, and had little places with the handball courts and stuff. We played there. It was a little bit of a walk. Actually, when the BQE was first built, before it was finished, we could walk down to the BQE. We were on 65th, and the BQE was 68th Street, and we could walk down to 68th Street and walk on the road that was built. Wow. Actually on the BQE, and walk down to St. Michael's that way because the road was empty.
When was that built?
Late 50s, I guess. And you could actually walk on the street, on the highway, because it was easier to walk to the highway. If you had to walk there and you couldn't walk on the highway, it was a little bit of a walk.
So he's talking about, let's see, I must still have the map up. Yeah, so this is the block he grew up on. This block here. 65th place in Woodside, and where's the BQE? This must be the BQE here. Yeah. I don't know where St. Michael's is, but he said they used to walk 60. Yeah, he said it was on 68th Street. So here's 68th Street. So they used to walk over to here to 68th Street. This is where the BQE was, and they used to take this to St. Michael's I have no idea where that would be. I mean, he might have said it, but I wasn't paying attention. It might have been here. I wonder if this is the Bamboo Island thing he was talking about in the previous one. Woodside Rhinos, Big Bush Playground. I wonder if any of these is what he was talking about. Nathan Weldenbaum. I'm going to just type in like St. Michael's, see what comes up. St. Michael's Playground, yeah. Huh. Yeah, so he was here. Damn, that is a bit of a walk. They used to walk to the BQE before it was even built. It was just a road. And they used to walk. Wow, that's a long-ass walk. All the way down to St. Michael's Playground. Holy shit. I know where that is. Oh, I know exactly where that is. Yeah. There'd be some times where you like had to get off this road, go this way, and get on that road in my life. Let's take a look. Squirrel. There's the handball court. I mean, who knows if it's the same exact one. Oh, there's I guess that's St. Michael's something. I should go there. Wow. I've never been there. Super cool. All right. Good to know. Good to know.
Walk there, and you couldn't walk on the highway. It was a little bit of a walk. It was pretty far down. It was up, it was pretty far down from Woodside. But when you walked on the highway, you were there in like 2 minutes. So we would
walked down.
You walked to 68th Street, and there was the road there, and you just walked down the hill, and you'd walk along the roadway. That only lasted about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. Then it got, it was finally got built. But it was interesting because, we could just walk along there.
Do you remember before the BQE was there and there were houses?
I remember somewhat. Yeah. I remember on Woodside Avenue, that's the way I would walk to school. On Woodside Avenue, the BQE went underneath it. And before it was built, there were stores. There was stores on one side, like tenements. It looks like tenements, but they were storefronts. Very dilapidated old storefronts. And I remember one was, and then there was a sanitation garage, a very small, like a house. It was not really a garage. It was sort of a house where the sanitation workers would stay. I don't know why they stayed there, but it was a pot-bellied stove there in this house on the corner. And I think it was the trucks were parked near there, but I guess it was a place where they could stay when they were not off, when they were off duty or something. And there was like a pot-bellied stove, and they would sit in there. And then there was a couple of stores, and then across the street there was a warehouse. And then there were stores, and what they did was they had to cut through the warehouse was big, and so what they did was they actually cut the warehouse in half diagonally.
Huh.
And so what was left was half a square, a diagonal square. They left the warehouse built. They just filled in the wall.
I wonder if I can find that. So he was here. I guess he must be talking about that. I wonder if they're talking about something around here. Like this. This is a diagonal there. Huh. I don't know. Maybe. It's a good candidate. Oh, you know what might make more sense? To do satellite view. Oh, my wife's home. Oh, wait. That is gotta be it. That's gotta be it there. That's crazy. Oh, how can I see this? That's not a warehouse, though. It's just a house. I guess it could have been converted. That's so funny. Wow. I think he must be talking about that, or maybe over there. Crazy. Okay, so my wife is home. I think I'm gonna be done for the day. Yeah, that's just where I am. I'll left off at 1:58:46. Okay, we'll save this. We'll save this. See you later, Dad. Miss you, man. Well, I have a few viewers. Thank you so much. I take it you're subscribers. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitch, too. On Twitch, I have a different name. On Twitch, I am bald__Steve. On Twitch. Why isn't the chat box showing? Whatever. Yeah, so I guess I could write it down here. So on Twitch, fuck it. On Twitch, I am Bald Steve. Bald__ Steve. I'm also that on Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm seeing more viewers come in, so thank you. I'm gonna do this again. It looks like I'm doing this Friday. Looks like I'm doing these on Mondays and Fridays, according to my planner here. So tune back in Friday. At, let's say, I don't know, 3 o'clock or so. Sometime on Friday. I'll make the event, and so you guys can tune in. But yeah, thanks again, everybody. Talk to you later. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll get back to seeing my dad, who's not with us anymore. It's really good to hear his voice, though. I'm so glad I made these interviews, and I'm getting through them. Okay.